boyfriend took a knee at family dinner and asked me to marry him, but before I could speak, sister shocked everyone saying she was pregnant with his baby, and I just sat there as the entire room fell into chaos. I didn't even know that he had bought a ring. That's what continues to go through my head the most about how I just sat there, unaware, with a glass of wine in my hand, smiling like an idiot while my entire world was already in flames and I just hadn't yet smelled the smoke. We were over at my parents' for Sunday supper, the kind of thing we'd only do every couple months or so because my family's kinda like, you know. My mom's the kind of person who likes to keep up the nice front even if everything else is falling apart behind it. And my sister? She was already on her 4th glass by the time we had dessert on the table, so I should have known something was simmering. But I didn't. I really didn't. And that's probably why it hurt so much. I wasn't seeing it. Not even slightly. So there we are, all crammed around the dinner table, stiff laughter, stories we've all heard a million times previously, and I'm just happy, you know? Like actually happy. I was sitting next to Daniel, my 2-year boyfriend, and I just leaned over to say something dumb about the mashed potatoes when he stood up. I thought he was going to get more wine, but then he cleared his throat. And swear to God, my chest dropped into my stomach because I knew. Not from any sign or hint or glance. It was just the way the air realigned, how suddenly everyone's eyes were on him and not on the food. Then he took from his jacket pocket a tiny box. I swear the world came to a standstill for a second. My mom gasped. My dad muttered something under his breath. And I was stuck. Stuck like ice. My body didn't even know what to do. It was overwhelming. He looked straight into my eyes and started talking. I don't remember much of it, just fragments. You're my best friend, I want to spend my life with you, I love you. That kind of thing. And then, will you marry me? I didn't answer. Not at first. I just gazed at him. At the ring. At this whole dreamlike moment that didn't seem to be part of my own life. And I think I was going to say yes, possibly not out loud at all, but in my mind I was thinking about it, smiling, allowing the tears to fall. And then my sister laughed. This harsh, brittle laugh that sliced cleanly through everything like glass shattering on tile. She said, "Wow. I guess this is as good a time as any to tell you I'm pregnant." And it's his. The silence that ensued didn't even register. Like my ears were ringing. My brain could not keep up with words. I actually thought she was joking. I looked at her, really looked at her, and she wasn't laughing. She wasn't smirking. She was just sitting there, eyes glassy, wine glass shaking in her hand, as if she was challenging me to say she was bluffing. And Daniel? He didn't even say no. That was what killed me the hardest. He just looked down. Not at her. Not at me. Just down. Like a coward. Such a man that could not even respond with yes or no or anything. I did not weep. Not then. I stood up, left the ring sitting on the table, and just walked out the front door. I remember hearing my mom call me by my name, my dad say something about keeping this quiet, and my sister sob, but it was all hazy. Like I was underwater. I walked until I hurt in my feet. I didn't even get my bag or my keys. I just walked. Hours and hours. Until it was dark and cold and I had to order an Uber with the last 4% battery on my phone. I stayed at a friend's. Slept in her guest room. Vomited twice. And lay awake looking at the ceiling until morning. The next day, my phone was full of missed calls. Daniel. My mom. Even my dad, who never makes a call. And my sister, just one text. I didn't mean for it to sound like this. That's all it said. Like this was some awkward dinner table blunder. Not a stab in the back. I didn't answer. I didn't talk to anyone for days. I called in sick at work. Merely lying on my apartment floor with the blinds shut, trying to remember when all that started to go so horribly awry. Trying to understand what warnings I had overlooked. And that is when the actual pain kicked in. The one that gets you when the numbness sets in and reality starts unloading its suitcases. I started remembering all the times she used to come over whenever Daniel was present. The manner in which they would mock one another's puns. The inside references. How he always used to say to her that she reminded him of me. But louder and funnier. I used to take it as a compliment. God, I was so naive. And now, I couldn't stop replaying every moment through a new lens, realizing how blind I'd been. But the worst part? I still loved him. Even after all that he did, a part of me still hoped to believe that there was some twisted reason, some form of this story that didn't end in betrayal. I hated myself for it. For not being able to just erase him from existence. I was always thinking, who am I without him? And then I'd find myself thinking, who was I with him? Because clearly, I didn't know about either. It took 2 weeks before I finally tracked him down. Not that I forgave him, but because I wanted answers. I wanted to hear it from him. We agreed to meet at a park. Public. A neutral ground. He was exhausted. Gaunt. Guilt on his face. And when I told him straight out to him, is it true? He nodded. No explanations. No apologies. Just a weak, broken head nod. He explained it was once. A drunken mistake. He was drunk. She had been arguing with her boyfriend and was angry. They hooked up. I laughed at him. Like really did. Because of course it was like that. Always a mistake. Always alcohol. Always an excuse. He said sorry. That he didn't know she was pregnant until recently. That he was going to explain it to me, but he didn't know how. And asking for my hand in marriage? That was his effort at apology. As if placing a ring on my hand would delete the reality that he had slept with my sister. My sister. I turned around. Again. But it was different this time. For good. I knew I couldn't turn back, not to him, and not to her. Because it wasn't betrayal. It was something else. Something ill that had been rotting under the surface of my life for years. And maybe, in some ill manner, I did need that dinner to rip it all wide apart. To have a look properly. To finally cease to lie to myself about the people I believed I knew. I didn't speak to my sister for 3 months after. Not a single word. And you had to understand, we weren't just sisters, we were close. Or at least I felt like we were. We fought, since we shared a room as girls. Shared secrets. Shared midnight snacks and inane high school crushes and hushed plans about what our weddings would be like. So to change from that to nothing? It wasn't just painful. It was mourning death, but the subject was alive, breathing, still texting me I miss you and please talk to me, like those were magic words that would undo what she'd done. And I might have maybe attempted to keep it in perspective if it was some stranger. Or even someone I hardly cared about. But not him. Not her. Not both. What broke me more than the act itself was timing. That she allowed him to drop down on one knee. That she just sat there watching him drop down on one knee, watching me get choked up, and waited until that exact moment to inform him. Like there was part of her that wanted to watch me shatter. And the thing is, I don't think she did plan it like that. I really don't. But I believe something inside of her made me want to know. Maybe she was tired of being stuck with the blame. Or maybe she just could not stand for me to smile. I don't know. And maybe I never will know, because I am not sure even she knows why she did it like that. But I think about it over and over in my head, her voice, that shaking laugh, how her hand was shaking holding the wine glass. She wasn't proud. She wasn't cruel. She was just sloppy. And self-centered. And so fucking human. When I walked away from Daniel that day in the park, I started therapy. I'd never done it before. I had always told my friends I was okay, that they could talk to me about things. But this was different. I couldn't trust my family. I couldn't trust myself. I couldn't even trust my memories. It was as if my entire history had been recreated overnight, and I needed someone completely outside of it to walk me through the wreckage. My therapist Lauren said nothing initially. Just sat and listened. Let me monologue in circles and weep and scream and fold into silence. She didn't prod. She didn't intrude. She just sat there, week after week, and let me unravel. And slowly I did. I let the anger, the shame, the loss, all those twisted, tangled emotions that I didn't know how to stuff away inside myself. I explained to her about the evening my sister had called me drunk 2 years before, sobbing over some boy who cheated on her. I remembered how Daniel had answered the phone for me because I was taking a shower. How he spoke to her for 15 minutes before I even realized she'd called. I told Lauren about how they'd always had this strange closeness, not flirtatious, not out in the open, but something. A look. A kind of comfort. And I dismissed it because I trusted them. God, I trusted them so much. I told her how my mother had acted peacemaker afterwards, went on calling, went on asserting that it was just an awful mistake, that we were family after all, that we had to buck up and carry on. And all that I could hear in those words was pressure. Was denial. Was the same old game of sweeping things under the carpet until they fermented through the floorboards. I didn't want to be part of that kind of family anymore. I wanted truth. Even if it hurted. Even if it made me alone. Daniel texted me once after the park. It was a long one. Apologetic. He said he didn't deserve to be forgiven. That he was sorry. That he'd always loved me. That he hoped one day I'd heal. I never replied. I didn't delete it either. I couldn't. At least, not yet. It just remained there in my phone like a wound that constantly reminded me that love does not always mean safety. That sometimes the people who declare they love you the most are the ones capable of causing you the most pain. The weeks turned into months. I slowly started to rebuild. I went back to work. I unfollowed both of them on social media. I started journaling. Walked myself around for hours. Did things I hadn't done in decades, things that reminded me of who I used to be. Not somebody's girlfriend. Not somebody's sister. Just me. And then, one day, my sister showed up at my door. Out of the blue. No call ahead of time. No nothing. Just her face in the peephole, and she looked smaller than I remembered. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob, pounding. She knocked again. Gently. I opened it. She didn't speak a lot. Just, "Can I come in?" And I should have said no. Every logical part of me screamed no. But I moved aside anyway. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was weakness. Perhaps it was hope. I don't know. But I let her in. We just sat there for what felt like forever. She was a different woman, exhausted, pale, as if she hadn't slept in decades. And then she spoke softly. I didn't mean to. I swear. It just slipped out. And I hate myself for it every day. Her voice trembled. Her eyes filled up. And though I longed to scream, to throw something, to kick her out, I didn't. Because the pain on her face was real. And it was the same as mine. And that's when I realized something I hadn't learned earlier. She hadn't removed him from me. She had destroyed herself in the bargain too. She told me she was keeping the baby. That she had a girl. That Daniel was out of her life. She never apologized. She didn't plead. She just sat there, crying, saying she missed me. Saying she hated what she did. That she wished she could take it back. And for the first time, I believed her. But believing someone does not automatically mean you let them back in. When she left that day, I didn't embrace her. I didn't promise her anything. I just said I need time. And she nodded. Because she finally understood. This wasn't about fixing. This was about accepting them. Letting them hurt. Letting them change us. Letting them matter. And maybe learning to live with what's left behind. I did not cry when she left. I did not cry that night either. I just sat on the floor once she had left, and stared at the front door for hours, as though some part of me still expected her to knock again. But she didn't. And I think that was the kindest thing she could have done to let me be. To ultimately give up on attempting to repair what could not be repaired. Since humans have this myth they cling to, that forgiveness is a question of returning. That if you say the right words, and cry enough tears, and mean it hard enough, you can rewind. But there is no returning. There's only who you are in the moment, and whether or not you can contain what went down without it sinking you. I didn't think about the baby so much after that visit. Not in any bitter, screwed up way, not anymore. Just more like what her life was going to be like. What it would be like growing up with the story of how she was born. Would they tell her? Would she feel like a mistake? Would she hate me before she even knew me? And then I'd stop myself, because it wasn't her fault. None of this was. She was just a heartbeat. A breath. A tiny chance at something new, born out of wreckage. And some of me truly wished that my sister would be a more maternal mother than she was a sister. That she'd grow. That this entire debacle would prompt her to look at herself hard enough to really change. But I didn't inquire. I didn't phone to see how she was doing. I kept the distance. Because wanting the best for someone doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. Daniel reached out again sometime during the 5th month. Another email. I don't know why I even opened it, but I did. He said he was in therapy now. That he was trying to figure out his patterns. That he never thought he deserved love and ended up destroying the good in his life. More of a diary entry than a letter to me. And maybe that was the point, maybe he wasn't even writing to me at all. Maybe he just needed to dump his guilt somewhere. But halfway in was something that stuck with me. He wrote, "You loved me like I was whole, and I didn't know what to do with that." That sentence. I don't know why, but it crushed me. Because it was true. I did love him as if he was whole. Like I didn't see the cracks. Like love could fill them. And maybe that's my fault too. Maybe that's what I needed to learn, that loving someone isn't saving them. That you can't build a future with someone who hasn't even started repairing their own past. That sometimes the worst betrayal isn't something that somebody does to you, it's something they do to themselves and bring you along for the ride on the way down. I didn't respond to his email. I didn't need to. I think he knew that too. By the time my sister gave birth, I hadn't seen her in nearly 8 months. I found out from my mom, who sent a photo in the family chat group, just a tiny wrinkled face wrapped in pink, nameless and captionless. I stared at that photo for a very long time. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just felt tired. As if my body was still catching up with emotions that I had not yet felt. There was no boom. No revelation. Only this dull ache of knowing that there was this entire new person in the world now, a person tied to me in blood but not in trust. And I did not know what to do with that. I don't. Life went on. As it does. My apartment became quieter. My routines more regular. I found myself laughing again slowly, awkwardly at first, then freer. I started dating again too. Cautiously. Like someone cautiously dipping their toes into freezing water, waiting for it to sting. And it did sting. The first guy I went out with reminded me of Daniel, too slick, too polished, and I was out of there before dessert. The second one was sweet, but I flinched when he reached for my hand. The third made me laugh so hard I snorted wine out my nose. He didn't try to fix me. Didn't ask questions about the past. Just listened when I told him what I needed, and respected when I did not. We did not last long, a few months, maybe, but he made me forget that pain doesn't make you unlovable. That I could still be soft. Still be seen. And I guess that's what no one prepares you for after betrayal. It doesn't just change your relationship with them. It changes your relationship with yourself. With your memories. With your reflection. There were days I'd stare in the mirror and not recognize the girl who stared back. She appeared the same, obviously. But her eyes had heft to them now. Knowledge. A kind of sadness that doesn't show up in pictures but is there behind every smile. And I had to get to know her again. Learn to trust her. Learn to trust myself. I ran into my sister at a grocery store about a year after that dinner. I was picking up almond milk, and she was coming around the corner with a stroller. We both stopped. I think part of me had been steeling myself for it, for some awkward, public moment, but when the moment arrived, I couldn't breathe. She looked older. Not just tired, but older. As though motherhood had carved new lines in her face. The baby she was holding fast asleep, head tilted to the side, tiny fists bunched under her chin. I looked at her. This little person who didn't ask for any of it. And I whispered, not thinking even, "What's her name?" My sister hesitated, then said, "Mira?" I nodded. She did not try to talk more. Did not reach out. Just stood, quietly, like she knew this was all I had to give. I whispered, "She is beautiful," and walked away. That night, I cried for the first time in months. Not from anger. Not from sadness. But from release. Because something inside of me finally let go, not of the pain, not of the betrayal, but of the desire to rewrite it. Of the wish that it could have been different. Because it wasn't. And that had to be okay. I didn't sleep that night after meeting her. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Myra's face replaying over and over in my mind. I couldn't get over how small she was. How fragile. How untouched by any of the pain that had created her. She didn't know the shouts that had been screamed behind closed doors. She didn't know the silence that followed. She didn't know me, not yet, not as an aunt, not even as a name. And for some reason, that made me cry harder. Because for the first time, I wasn't crying for what I lost. I was crying for what she never got. A clean beginning. A whole family. People who could be in the same room without choking on the weight of what happened. It's strange how grief morphs over time. In the beginning, it was fire-hot, wild, unstoppable. I needed to scream, shatter, toss memories in garbage bags. But now, it was a mist. Something I inhaled in my lungs, that pulled me down in the quiet moments. And maybe that's what healing is, not forgetting, not forgiving, but coming to carry the weight differently. More gently. More truthfully. The first time I saw Mira properly, she was 13 months old. My sister invited me round. She didn't push. She just said, if you ever want to meet her, I'd really like that. And I didn't answer straight away. I let the message sit. For days. Weeks. I read it so many times I started to see the words differently every time I read them. But one morning I woke up and I didn't have that sink in my stomach anymore. And I knew I was perhaps ready. Not for reconciliation. Not for a clean slate. But for this child. For this little person who shared my blood and none of my history. I remember standing in front of the apartment, frozen. I almost turned back twice. My hands were sweating. My heart was pounding. But when the door opened and my sister stood there with Mira in her arms, something inside me shifted. Mira looked up at me with these huge, questioning eyes so round and focused, like she was still considering smiling or not. And then she did. This goofy, toothy grin that melted me in an instant. And there I was, crying again. Ugly, humiliating crying. My sister didn't say anything. She just stepped aside and invited me in. We didn't talk much that day. We didn't try to fix anything. She handed Mira over to me and went to make tea, and I sat on the floor with that tiny girl in my lap, just overwhelmed by how light she was and how heavy the moment was. Mira reached up and touched my necklace, pulled my hair gently, made a sound that appeared to be ba, and laughed when I stuck my tongue out. It was simple. It was small. And it was everything. In the months that went by, I went to see her more. By myself. I did not go for long. I did not go often. But I went. And I slowly started to not jump every time I saw my sister's face. She was different now. Still broken in some ways, yes, but attempting. Showing up for motherhood like it was the one thing she had left to get right. And I think, in her own way, that was true. She was a good mother. Exhausted, burned out, but present. And that counted for something. More than I thought it would. We never really had a moment of closure, I guess. There wasn't some big discussion or dramatic apology that fixed everything. Just a slow, gradual thaw. A shift in the air between us. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes not. She'd sometimes bring up the past, and I'd shut up. And she'd nod and drop it. Because we both knew we couldn't go back there without bleeding all over again. So we built something new, not a repaired version of what was, but a cautious, quiet appreciation of who we now were. And as for Daniel, I never did see him again. I heard he moved out of state. Changed jobs. I didn't look for him. I didn't seek to discover whether he entered into a new relationship, or whether he ever got better. I let him go completely. Not because I wasn't still wondering I was, but because I finally accepted that not every question is entitled to an answer. Some things simply exist. And trying to explain them only serves to keep you tied to the wreckage. It's been over 2 years now. Mira is walking, talking, questioning in that incessant toddler way that makes you laugh even when you're bone-tired. She calls me Ree, since Auntie doesn't quite work yet. And every time she throws her arms around my neck or holds up a crayon drawing or babbles out some made-up tale, I feel this pang in my chest that's not quite sadness and isn't quite joy. Just something in between. Something real. And I've changed too. I don't fall apart the way I used to. I don't analyze every smile or flinch at every compliment. I've also come to listen to myself, the quiet voice, the one who always knew something was amiss when I wasn't ready to look. I've come to understand that to be betrayed does not make you damaged, it only means you loved with your whole heart. And that is not a weakness. It's a strength. I don't know whether I will ever be capable of trusting my sister fully again. I think there are some lines, once you cross them, that get burned into the ground. But I do love her. I do. Just maybe not in the way I used to, not in that simple, kids type of love. But something different. More deliberate. Like loving someone in spite of. Like loving someone through it. And Daniel? He's a ghost now. A chapter 1 don't reread. A voice I can't even really remember anymore. He's in the past, where he belongs. And I'm here. With my messy, battered, tough heart. With my boundaries. With my niece's artwork on my fridge. With the echo of her giggles in my hallway. So, yeah? My boyfriend proposed to me at a family dinner. And my sister announced she was pregnant with his baby in the same breath. And I knew that would kill me. But it didn't. It was the beginning of a harder, wiser, quieter version of me. The kind who doesn't pretend anymore. The kind who survives. The kind who knows what love should look like because I've seen what it doesn't. And I will never forget that. Ever.